Welcome back. Republicans and Democrats around here don't agree on much, but they do agree on this. If college-educated Republican women didn't cross over and vote Democrat in the recent House 72 election, Margaret Good may not have won. Republican women crossing over and voting Democrat in large numbers isn't just happening here. It recently happened in Miami. It happened in the U.S. Senate race in Alabama, and the question is why? President Trump? The gun issue, or what? Joining us for more is Rita Ferrandino, former chair of the Sarasota Democratic Party, Lynn Larson of the Sarasota Republican Party, and Kate Bradshaw. And Lynn, let me start with you. Margaret Good only won on Election Day by 110 votes, and our friends at the Herald Tribune reported that led political analysts to conclude a big chunk of Republican voters, most independent voters and women, voted for Good. Question to you is it because Democrats worked harder, or were Republican women voting against the Republican candidate for another reason?
I think that the Republican women, were voting because the Democrat Party had worked very hard on that race. And I think you had two very qualified candidates. You had a woman that had been in that seat that resigned, and another woman running probably had an advantage.
All right, Rita, I'm sure you would accept the compliment that the Democrats outworked the Republicans in this case and the other reasons, but in your opinion, were there issues? Was it President Trump? Was it the gun issue? Was it whatever?
Absolutely, and I think Republican women clearly crossed over and voted for Margaret Good, and I think it's because of her stand on issues. She was very clear that she was pro-public education. She was very clear on her stance in healthcare and on the environment, and I think that Republican women felt really comfortable and confident that she was trustworthy and stood for them.
Kate, you know the old Tip O'Neill saying, all politics is local. Right. Was this just a unique race here in Sarasota County, or do you draw a connection between this race and the recent special election with a similar result in Miami, or even the Alabama Senate race?
Well, I would say that there are certainly more women who are becoming interested in not only voting but becoming candidates. I think this is part of a trend, but what we saw in District 72 was unique, and I think there was a little bit more energy among Democrats and resources that went into that race. So it was, I think, kind of a combination of the two in this case.
Well, let's talk for a moment about the elephant in the room, and it's it's President Trump. And Lynn, let me ask you this: I've heard some national conversation that some of these races around the nation, the special elections, is because there are college-educated women in large numbers who look at President Trump and his personal behavior, and that's the reason why they're not voting Republican right now.
I don't know any women that are saying that. The women that I know that are college-educated Republicans are saying that they vote for the candidate who's going to improve the economy and who's going to help all people, find jobs. So I think that's one of the big things is try to help protect our borders. I mean, not just immigration and people complaining about that, but we could have terrorists coming through our borders right now. Our borders are terrible.
But the economy generally is perceived to be doing well right now.
And people believe that it's doing well because of some of the things that President Trump has done.
Then why, in this case, are many Republican women crossing over?
Well, you say that they're crossing over. I think it's an individual race, and it's not just women. I think all people, no matter what race you are, what sex you are, it's like all people want the economy to do well. They want jobs, and they want the things that President Trump is doing right now.
Okay, we have to take just a quick break, and we'll have much more on the power of women voters right after we check the First Alert weather. Stay with us. Welcome back. College-educated white women may have a huge impact on the upcoming midterms in numbers that we have not seen before. And joining us for more is Rita Ferrandino, former chair of the Sarasota Democratic Party, Lynn Larson of the Sarasota County Republican Party, and Kate Bradshaw of Creative Loafing. And Rita, I want to give you a chance to respond to something that Lynn said. In essence, that Margaret Good's recent victory over James Buchanan was just a function of Democrats getting their vote out and outworking the Republicans, and not an issue-oriented reason why she won?
Well, I disrespectfully disagree. First of all, you have to remember that Margaret Good is not a politico. She absolutely came to the table saying, hey, I think things have to change. I want to make a difference. I've never run for anything. I'm going to put myself in the hat to run for this seat. So she had no political ambitions prior to just being a fed-up woman wanting to go to Tallahassee to make a difference. And that is the momentum that people bought into. The fact that she was a competent attorney with a very strong track record, daughter of a preacher and a nurse, and just clearly that really just came through, is that she was in this for all the right reasons, and people started to really trust her, and the momentum built from that. The other thing you have to remember is that this is not a 50% Republican, 50 Democrat district. This is a district that Republicans have 42% of the voters, with a 32% Democratic voter registration disadvantage. So Margaret, in order to win, had to have the independents and Republicans cross over, which is what we saw happened and why she's in Tallahassee.
So Lynn, let me just ask you briefly, given that, is it simply that the Democrats outworked the Republicans there, or is there an issue reason, in your opinion, why some Republican women crossed over?
As I said before, there was a woman in that district who resigned, and so it was clearly that district had chosen a woman to represent them. And I think that the woman running, and it was a competent woman, she was very competent, she ran. And we had also James Buchanan who ran, and he was not a politico. He had never run for anything. He's a young man, a young family man, but he had never run for office before either.
But Ray Pilon had that seat before, Keith Fitzgerald had that seat. And James Buchanan is the son of Vern Buchanan, and you cannot say that that's not a politico.
Kate, let me ask you about the bigger context here. Newsweek magazine recently reported that college-educated women are increasingly abandoning the damaged Republican Party as part of a backlash against President Trump. Do you agree with that in terms of what you're seeing in the entire Tampa Bay area?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's definitely a gender gap, rather, in terms of the approval rating. It's bigger, and it's consistent, and it's much larger than the gap that President Obama had. And I think that, I mean, the Tampa Bay area is kind of a microcosm of the rest of the country, and just given not only the Women's March and how people keep coming back to those events, but just every weekend there's a different march, sometimes multiple marches, and people are active and they're engaged.
Okay. We have to take a quick break, and we'll be back for much longer final thoughts when we return. And we continue our conversation. Kate, let me ask you this. What impact, if any, in your opinion, does the Parkland shooting have on the equation that we're talking about, in terms of there are very specific ideas out there, some of which the Florida legislature has addressed, in terms of raising the legal age to buy a long gun, the question of whether or not assault-type weapons should be legal or not. How does this affect the politics in terms of how women in Florida vote?
Well, I will say this. I did a post probably a couple of weeks ago on how Tampa Bay area lawmakers voted on the assault weapons ban, or at least the motion to take up debate on the assault weapons ban, and that was one of the most viewed posts that I've ever had. And I mean, when you're talking about kids in these vulnerable positions, and families being in these vulnerable positions wherever they go, because these weapons are legal and practically anyone can buy them, you know, I think it's especially going to have an impact on how women vote.
Lynn, is that something that you're concerned about in putting your Republican Party hat on, in terms of how women in particular feel about the availability of assault weapons and large capacity magazines, given what happened in our own state?
I don't think it's just women that are concerned about children's safety and people's safety with guns. I don't think that, I think it's more of a mental health issue. We've seen that. And the mental health has been questioned. There were warnings out there on parkland that were ignored, that were not listened to. So it's just not banning weapons, okay? Somebody wants to go in and they can get an axe and go after somebody. But I agree that they should not be so readily accessible, and the legislature has passed some things to make them more difficult to obtain immediately. So I think that's a start.
But not on the federal level. And again, the question, Rita, is this something that is a gender issue or not, as Lynn says?
So I think women are outraged and paying attention, and they're protesting and they're active like they've never been before. And I really do believe that this is the year of the woman. And I think for women, they're not seeing party. They're not Republicans and Democrats. Women are seeing themselves as women, and they're seeing themselves as wanting to protect the things that they care about. So I think these are the two issues that women really care about. I think that they're really disgusted and tired of Donald Trump and the Access Hollywood and the recent porn star. They're just fed up and tired of it, and they think we deserve better. And I think they think the second issue is they just don't believe that anybody needs an AK-47.
Right. So again, what we hear is that women will be big influencers in the midterm elections, especially in the suburbs. People talk about the Philadelphia suburbs. Newsweek reports that the numbers indicate that Democrats are already performing better with college-educated women than they have in the last two midterms. But that was before Parkland. So what Newsweek argues is the reason why Democrats lost support in the last few elections is because they were not adequately addressing the financial and the economic issues. Right now, Kate, the economy, people say, is doing a lot better, so it must be something else.
Well, yeah, I am not quite sure. I mean, I think that part of it is identity politics. Women essentially, women want more women in politics. And that number has grown. 28% of GOP women in 2016 said that they wanted more. They thought the government would do better if there were more women in politics. That number jumped to 59% in 2017. Meanwhile, you have a party that does not openly, actively recruit female candidates. So that's going to be a problem for the party as well.
So, Lynn, does the Republican Party have to do a better job in recruiting Republican women to run for office?
I think that there are qualified women out there. The problem is that politics can be a contact sport, and there's nothing but criticism. I can tell you, I was an elected official in Longboat Key, and no matter what I did, you're going to make people unhappy. There's lots of criticism. A lot of women may not want to listen to that on a regular basis, and still it's a good old boys network. I mean, it still is for the most part. So some women have been reluctant to get into that, and I can understand why.
Let me ask you about that, because we did so many shows on the Me Too movement, and I remember absolutely being stunned when I had Shirley Brown and Keith Fitzgerald in here and telling me about the atmosphere in Tallahassee on the floor of the House and the Senate and the hanky-panky that goes on up there. And I would imagine, Rita, that a lot of people don't want to be involved with that at all. And I also could imagine that people are coming out, and really there's a big pushback after what we found out in the Florida legislature and the U.S. Congress and elsewhere.
So I will tell you that today I had two communications with two of my very close Republican female friends who were giving me names of potential people to run for office on the Democratic ticket, because everybody is got on their mind that we have the ability to make change happen. I was at the Women's March in Washington, D.C., and I was at the Women's March right here in Sarasota. And Sarasota, it was 50-50. It was Republicans and Democrats and independents and kids and supportive spouses and boyfriends. And this movement is way beyond gender, and it's way beyond party politics.
So, Kay, what do you think, what do you see in terms of when you look at all the House and Senate races here in the Tampa Bay area, the congressional races and all going into this midterm? Can you point to some races that you think are really going to turn out differently because women are so energized to vote?
Right. Well, I would say House District 69 would be one. Jennifer Webb ran there against Kathleen Peters, also female, of course, Republican, and didn't turn out well. She's running against, assuming Webb clears the primary, she's going to be running against a male candidate. And I mean, I think that she's going to get a lot of support, but I mean, I would definitely right out predict she would win.
That's a Pinellas County race where she is racking up a massive amount of endorsements and so forth. And Lynn, finally, let me ask you this. You know, it used to be whoever could raise the most money has the best chance to win. Do you think that kind of equation is falling by the wayside right now?
Well, money will buy time and on TV, et cetera, as you know, so that helps get your face out there. But I think the most qualified candidate, and the qualified candidates will rise to the top. And I think that's the thing. It's not just men, it's not just women, it's a combination. We need the best candidates we can that are going to be conservative, that are going to try to bring back family values, who are going to try to concentrate on the economy.
And Rita, let me give you the quick last word.
What was the question?
You know, Margaret Good raised a considerable amount of money here on House 72. You know, is that, you know, can you duplicate that for another general election, and is that really one of the answers here?
I think money counts, but I really believe that this is the year where people and traditional candidates are going to sweep, because I think people are really looking for change and they really want diversity and they want fresh blood.
All right, we have to leave it there. Thank you all very much. FYI, you can watch past discussions on demand. They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. And for the latest on local breaking news, don't forget to download the updated version of our app. If your current app doesn't work, it's expired. Just go to the App Store and re-download it by searching for WWSB or My Suncoast. We want to thank our guests for being here tonight. Rita Ferrandino is the former chair of the Sarasota Democratic Party. Lynn Larson is with the Sarasota Republican Party. And Kate Bradshaw is political editor at Creative Loafing.